Lebensmute here. I've got 15 tips for beginners in Baldur's Gate 3. Tip number 1. Please, for the sake of clutter, expand your hotbars with the plus sign here. As you progress through the game, you will be inundated with many skills and actions at your disposal. If you're not into the extra space on the screen, cool, you can reduce it again with the minus sign. But save yourself some trouble with moving the dividers between action sections. Tip number 2. Use your actions each turn. You have a main action and a bonus action, sometimes more depending on your class, items, or consumables. Letting an action go to waste is like wasted potential. You know it's there, and you can't get it back once time has passed. There will be times where you cannot reasonably use one or the other, and that's totally fine, but get creative and try your best to use them. Tip number 3. Speaking of actions, you can select the icons above your action bar to show you which actions will use that specific resource. You've got action points, bonus action points, cantrips, sorcery points, bardic inspiration, channel oath charges, lay of hands charges, rage charges, spell slots of any level, warlock spell slots, wild shape charges, and key points. Selecting one puts everything available with that resource on display for you to choose from. Tip number 4. One thing you might forget about in the heat of the moment is about spells that require concentration. This is a feature for some spells that limits your character to one concentration at a time. Casting another skill that requires concentration will cancel out the previous one. If you desire, you can also cancel your previous concentration with the button below the character frame below, which is useful for preventing your companions from running through a field of grease or from running through your pseudo tornado of daggers. If it helps you remember, you can also sort your concentration spells out on your hotbar separately from your other spells to help spark those neurons in dicey moments. Tip number 5. Ritual spells are a classification of spells that can be used both in and out of combat, but outside of combat, they do not cost a spell slot to use. Each spell has their own class and level requirements, but all of them are extremely useful in specific moments. For example, the Longstrider spell can be cast on every party member, including yourself, to increase movement by an additional 3 meters in combat until the next long rest, which is an additional 33% for races with normal stature and a whopping 40% increase for those with short statures. There's almost no reason for you not to have it on at all times. If you don't want to keep that specific character with your preferred ritual spell in the party, you can cast it while in camp and dismiss them afterwards. Non-summon ritual spells will persist even without them present. Tip number 6. In a game like this, knowledge is a powerful tool at your disposal, and the Examine feature will provide you with near limitless knowledge about friend and foe alike. On PC, simply right-click the enemy and select Examine. From here, you can see their attribute scores along with their proficiencies, armor class, damage resistances, and their current traits and statuses they are affected by. Attribute scores with a hexagon surrounding the number indicate a proficiency, which means that they have an additional boost to saving throws regarding that specific attribute. The higher a score is, the more likely they are to resist damage or statuses involving that attribute. Below those scores is where you'll find enemy resistances. Shields with a complete yellow glow indicate a full negation to damage of that type against them. Shields with a blue arrow pointing up indicate a half negation to magical damage, while a white arrow pointing up indicates a half negation to non-magical damage of that type. On the opposite spectrum, a red arrow pointing down means that damage of that specific type deals double to that enemy. A good example would be the undead in a crypt. Bludgeoning damage deals double to them, allowing for blunt weaponry or fists to make quick work of them. You can find the type of damage your specific weapon or attack deals by looking at the tooltip for it here. Tip number 7. You may wonder why Shadowheart constantly misses her Sacred Flame spell but lands her Firebolt more often even though it is not specific to her class. This is because of the saving throw that enemies must make against these spells, which you can locate here on the tooltip of each spell or ability. Sacred Flame requires an enemy to pass a dexterity saving throw, which many enemies, especially early game, possess an ample amount of. Firebolt requires them to pass an intelligence saving throw, something more enemies lack early on. For this reason, it is best to examine your enemies prior to attacking to find out which of their attributes are highest and plan accordingly. Try not to be that person that casts a spell that requires a dexterity save on an enemy with 19 dexterity plus proficiency unless you really have to. Tip number 8. While building out your character, it helps to understand when your attributes will provide a benefit to you. This benefit is provided every even number for a specific attribute, with no benefit or hindrance at a value of 10, but with repercussions at every odd number lower than 10. For example, increasing your strength to a total of 12 will provide a +1 bonus to strength rolls and saving throws, but decreasing it to 9 will cause a -1 bonus to them instead. Then you may ask yourself, why would I have my attribute values at a number like 13? I don't gain benefit from that unless it is 14. Well, Timmy, that's because you can level up and choose feats to increase the values, discover various story or quest events that can increase or decrease your attributes, or even discover magical items that alter those values for better or worse. Tip number 9. Multi-classing is an amazing feature to utilize unique aspects of desired classes with each level increase. You can multi-class into every single class, or just dip your toes into one additional if you please. However, you only gain all proficiencies from your initial class you start with at level 1. For example, if you start as a wizard and multi-class into a fighter, you'll gain proficiencies with simple weapons, martial weapons, light and medium armor, and shields. You won't gain proficiency with heavy armor or 2 fighter-focused skills like you normally would starting out, but this shouldn't stop you from expanding your repertoire. Each class will have some missing proficiencies when you select it as a secondary option, but you will still gain spells, skills, feats, and traits as normal on level ups. Another consideration when multi-classing could be the primary stat for a desired class. If you're looking to be primarily a cleric with 8 intelligence and multi-class into a wizard to use many of the wizard's damaging spells, you may be in for a bit of a surprise when you're missing often. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but it may be better for utility instead of damage. A more feasible combination for efficiency would be like Warlock and Bard, as they both primarily use the charisma attribute for their function. Get creative with the class freedom Larian gave you, and tell me about your favorite combos in the comment section below. And while you're at it, drop a like. Tip number 10. As with many RPG games, most players, including myself, have a collection of unused scrolls in my inventory I thought I would save for later. In Baldur's Gate 3, wizards can learn spells directly from spell scrolls to increase their versatility. You can find it under the spellbook tab at the top when you open the inventory, or press K on your keyboard. There's a small button near class actions to learn more spells. Each spell scroll has a specific school, and wizards can specialize in a subclass for a school to decrease the gold value it requires to learn that spell from a scroll. Simply click the box on the right side of the spell you want to learn, and then select the Learn button at the bottom. The scroll will be destroyed, and the new spell will be available for you to prepare. Tip number 11. Find Familiar allows you to summon several kinds of useful beings to aid you in your adventures. On the plus side, it is also a ritual spell. Familiars are available to several classes, being Rangers via Beast Tamer, Warlocks with Pact of the Chain boon, Wizards, Fighters via the Eldritch Knight subclass, and Rogues via the Arcane Trickster subclass. You can also get this spell at level 4 by selecting the Ritual Caster or Magic Initiate wizard feats. A few notable familiars include the Raven, which can serve as an agile forward scout, the Cat, which can distract NPCs you're trying to sneak by or gather them for a devastating AoE attack, the Imp, which can fly around the battlefield and become invisible to relocate safely, and finally, the Quasit, a friendly critter that can go invisible and frighten enemies. Bonus tip, there is a Quasit scroll in an alchemist basement in Act 1 that any class can use to gain an interesting named companion. Tip number 12. Yet another item likely taking up space in inventories everywhere, elixirs are powerful concoctions that can be found, purchased, or created to give a buff with increased duration. Most of them last until your next long rest. For example, using the elixir of poison resistance provides an additional 50% resistance to poison until the next long rest. The elixir of hill giant strength grants you 21 strength until the next rest, further increasing your carry weight. However, elixirs do not stack with similar buffs or racial traits. Tip number 13. When you're an avid item hoarder like me that picks up things that could even be remotely useful later, you may struggle with the excess of items in your pack. Thankfully, Baldur's Gate 3 has a variety of inventory management options. At the top, there is a button you can click that will ask you how you want to sort your inventory automatically. The search bar beside it will further enable you to organize your inventory or even search for that specific and obscure item you forgot about until now. On PC, you can hold control and click items to highlight more than one to be moved around, which I tend to do with the bogus amount of scrolls I have as I move them into the pouch. If you have a whole section of inventory you want to move over to a bag or another character's inventory, you can hold shift and click on the start of the area you want to move and click on the item at the very end. This will highlight a whole section in a horizontal fashion to be moved with ease. If you're struggling to figure out items that may be equipped in a certain slot on a party member, simply click the equipment slot and it will bring up the possible items that you possess that can be equipped there. Tip number 14. If you notice you're getting weighed down too much, be sure to check your camp supply sack. If you're carrying anything in there, you can send them all to your camp safely. Each time you decide to long rest, your supplies will be pulled from the camp chest instead, freeing up inventory space for you to continue to steal and pillage in peace. You can send any item to the camp chest and retrieve it later, which could even be useful for those sadistic individuals who stash copious amounts of explosive barrels until someone needs a lesson. Tip number 15. For the last tip, as you progress through the game, the amount of reactions, which are actions that require a prerequisite action to function that can be used once per turn, will increase steadily. At some point, you may have a toddler's book worth of reactions and only want to use a handful of them. To deactivate some, you can select the box on the left side of the menu. If you prefer to activate naturally without stopping to ask you, you're free to leave it as is from here. If you want the game to ask each time a reaction occurs, check the box on the right side below the Ask column, and it will prompt you when available. For example, if you basic attack an enemy as a rogue, if a sneak attack is possible, it will prompt you if you would like to consume your reaction for the turn to activate the effect. Likewise, if an enemy runs past your character within melee range and an opportunity attack is possible, it will prompt you. Consider your available reactions before you choose, as some may be more useful than others or even obsolete. Those are my 15 tips for Baldur's Gate 3. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing. We'll see you in the next one.